Good morning and welcome. How many of you find people fascinating? How many find yourselves fascinating? Yeah. Are you amazed what goes on inside your head at times? Would that be fair? Are you disgusted at what goes on inside your head at times? You know, human beings are clearly a complex, sophisticated amalgam of intellect, emotion, psychology, spirit, physical, and so on. And one of the challenges that we all face in our lives is, how do you manage self? How do you program self? How do you manage yourself functionally? And particularly if it's towards the direction of creating something of significance. And we're going to be looking at this whole notion of greatness as an idea. Now, I can tell you, I get a little bit annoyed when, who's ever been to a motivational speaker? Who likes, make a fist and go, yes, awaken the giant within, and all that crap, right? Doesn't it annoy you? Have you heard of this thing called The Secret? Have you heard of this thing? Doesn't that piss you off? Right, like if you can visualize, you can actualize. There's something called do the work. Have you heard of that one? Right, so I get a bit annoyed with this stuff. And you know how everyone always thinks everything's a sign? I wonder what the universe is trying to tell me. Have you heard people say this? I always want to say to them, I can tell you what the universe is trying to tell you. Nothing, right? Vast, you kind of insignificant, right? And not everything's a sign. I mean, if a bird craps on your shoulder, what happened was a bird crapped on your shoulder. Right? There's billions of birds and billions of people, and the conjunction of feces and shoulder will happen. All right? There's not some sort of sign about what your future holds for you. All that nonsense. All right, so we're going to sort of get a bit more practical around this notion of how do you build something of significance. I'll just take this thing off here. Do you know that today's International Star Wars Day? I was driving in the car this morning, and it's because of the worst pun in the history of dates. Because of course it's May the 4th. So May the 4th be with you it's a bit sad. All right, so some years ago I was invited to a conference in Mumbai in India. And it was a United Nations conference, and I was fortunate enough to be invited along with a few representatives from Australia. There was about 140 people from 75 different countries around the world gathered. And the whole notion was that we're going to sit in conversation for 4 days to discuss the notion of global values. In other words, is there a set of values that transcends all cultural, geographical, racial boundaries? Is there a universal set of values that can hold humanity together? And as a way of trying to ameliorate and reduce the whole notion of warfare and conflict and try and create a bigger world. That's a fairly great aspiration, would you agree? All right, so it's a fairly significant experience. So we all arrive, and when you arrive at events like this, everyone's trying to be too cool for school, hello and all that. And so we're broken up into various groups, and I was with a group of about 60 people. And we walked into this room, and there was a big U set of chairs, so there's big sort of massive circle of chairs. And so we all sit down, greet each other, and all trying to think we're smart. And then the facilitator walked up. She was an Indian woman. She was dressed in a sari, and she sat down in the front, and she said, "Well, welcome. We're here to have a 4-day conversation on global values, what constitutes greatness, and world-class leadership." So we waited. She said, "That's it. It started." And there's no structure, no agenda. She was just waiting for the conversation to unfold. Well, somebody stood up and started capturing things on whiteboards, and somebody said, "Oh, what are some of the world's great leaders? Who are the role models that we can aspire to be? Who are the classic names that came up? What do people say? Things like Gandhi, Mandela, George Bush." He nailed it. Aung San Suu Kyi, the classics, right? And the idea was we try and unpack the psychology of these people, the values that they held, the mindsets that they had, the philosophies they had constructed, the political acumen that they demonstrated, and the courage that they showed sometimes in the face of immense adversity. And so we went on this and became a bit egoic, right? There's a little bit of, that sort of game when people who's the biggest ape in the room, that sort of gear. And so we weren't exactly demonstrating global values, to say the least. And on day 3, I think it was, there was one woman who was part of the group. She was also from an Indian woman, but she lived in New York. And she raised her hand and said, I'd like to share something that I came across as a result of a conference that I attended, a women's conference in New York a few months ago. And then she spoke for about 20 minutes, and she revealed what's something called the 8 powers. And we all sat there transfixed with what she had to share with us. And at the end of it, we all looked at each other and said, well, that's it. If we can get these 8 powers, enact them, enable them, apply them, and start to utilize them not only in ourselves but others, perhaps we could do something of significance, perhaps even greatness. I'd like to share those 8 powers with you. How does that sound? All right, it's a little bit different, a little bit out there. All right, let's go. All right, just a little bit about my background. Is my accent obvious? You can still hear it? What is it? South Africa. Oh, bloody hell. Right, so what happens is that often when I start a conference, people are sitting there going, okay, who's this bloke here? Okay, oh God, he's a South African. They're all arrogant dickheads, you know that, don't you? Make me laugh, monkey man. All right? I'll get a bit of that. I don't know why. Are white male South Africans really genuinely arrogant? Is that the deal? Yes, okay. So I left there when I was a younger man, so I try and make some excuses. Anyone been there or from there? Anyone from there, been there? Been there, from there? From there? So, brother. All right, so we got all that. Well, I grew up in the middle of the apartheid era, you know, so I'm 54 years old now, so this was I grew up when it was really full on. So by the time I got to university, man, I was one of these student activist types, you know. Anyone been in a riot? Who's done rioting? All right, I'll go to a few people. Colin's been there, so a few people have done rioting. If you haven't done rioting, I'll give you a few tips, okay? First of all, you need the 3 R's. The 3 R's to writing. First one, you need righteousness, right? You need to be right. Next, rage. You need to be seriously pissed off. Third, rocks, right? Because you throw something. It's also good to get a crowd, because if you write on your own, no one pays any attention. Now, I don't want to trivialize it, because it was bloody scary. And I mean, you've been watching what's happened across the Middle East in the last year or so. And when you see, I mean, Syria, just the horror of what's happening on the streets over there. What causes someone to put themselves into such a high-risk situation where they put their bodies in front of bullets? Now, to do that, you have to be at a level of such rage and also a feeling of such impotence that's all you got left is to put yourself there. And the reason that we got ourselves there was because of leaders. Because people had enough capacity to excite our mind, inform us in a way that realized the horror that was surrounding us that we couldn't see, and inspire us to have the courage to get out there. You know, these are acts of greatness when people can do this. So there's something about how people articulate and tell a message that can create a shift in people, which I'll be discovering as one of the 8 powers. I had to leave the country in a hurry. The police were after me. But the police were after lots of us. This is not some big hero story. But, you know, I was a refugee and I had to get over into Zimbabwe and I went to go and live in the Middle East. That was the only country in the world I could get to without a visa was Israel. So I'm a Catholic boys boarding school product. I've done the therapy. And I arrived in Israel in the middle of a war. All right, so it's warfare. There was a Syrian missile crisis in those days. Some missiles are flying over, you're diving into bomb shelters. And you start to think that this is the world. Would you agree with me? Australia was kind enough to give me a visa. So when I arrived here, I thought I had arrived in paradise. I couldn't believe it. The peace, the freedom. I remember arriving at Sydney Airport and I handed my passport over. The bloke opens up and he goes, "Oh, Mr. James, oh, I see you're a new immigrant." I said, well, Colin, I wish you all the best of luck and welcome to Australia, Cole. So I went from Mr. James to Colin to Cole in 30 seconds. How cool is that, right? And also you can say what the hell you like here. I mean, if I see a politician walking down the street, John Howard or someone, I go, "You bastard, I will not get arrested, I will not get beaten up, my family won't suffer." Isn't that great? In fact, you get a round of applause. Yeah. You're allowed to mock and vilify your leaders. I think that's a sign of civilization in my book. Right. My background is in marketing and broadcasting, and at the age of 30, I established my own business. And I've been working as a trainer, facilitator, presenter for the last 24 years. It's been most of my time overseas, so whilst I love Australia, I only probably spend about 4 or 5 months of the year here. Most of my time is in Asia Pacific in the US, but every now and then have an opportunity to attend to conferences like this, and that's a bit about me. So any questions on my background? Okay, we'll get to know each other a little bit more. Now, I don't use technology, I use flip charts. What do you reckon? Do you like that? All right. Look, sometimes PowerPoint paralysis gets me, man. When I see heading, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, heading, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet, heading, logo bottom right-hand corner, logo bottom, it drives me nuts, man. I love it when they read it. Okay, I'm just going to go on the first slide here. The first item is the agenda, which I'm doing now. Then we're going to have a brainstorming session, and here we'll be doing some brainstorming, right? Jesus, man, shut up. I love it when they go, "Now you probably won't be able to read this." Why put it up there? Jesus. All right, so I'll be using a flip charty things. Okay, so let's jump into the 8 powers stuff. Now, if you want to take notes, that's fine. If you want any questions, right, just call them out. Right, we've got 90 minutes together. It's a very short period of time. Normally, I do 7-hour programs, so this is a bit tight. So I'll go quite rapidly. But if you want to call out stuff, give it a whirl, and off we go. So these 8 powers. Now, the 8 powers are constructed around attitude, behavior, and skill. And so we'll unpack these and delve into them. By the way, we will have some conversation with colleagues around you as well, so a little bit of side chat. I won't be just talking at you the whole time. Now, the first one was a power that was built around an experience I had about 4 or 5 years ago now. I do quite a lot of executive coaching, right? So one of my clients sent me off to Singapore to go and hang out with a guy who was taken over a big petrochemical company. He was an American dude. That's neither here or there. But one of the problems was that he was a bully, and he was culturally and massively culturally inappropriate. So my job was to try and spend a week with him to see what the deal was, right? So I arrive at Changi Airport, and I meet the guy. He's a big chap, right? He's not anorexically challenged, right? He's substantial, very, very affable, very, friendly. Hi, Carlin, and all that. So, we got on, we had dinner. The next morning, he's very, very pleasant, very friendly, that archetypal Texan American hospitality. You know what I'm talking about? So we then go into our first meeting, right? So he walks in, and I could watch his demeanor change, right? He sort of he shifted gears, right? And suddenly he became a little sort of menacing. And then he sat down in the meeting, and he took the power position right up at the top of the table. And everything about him now went, oh, emperor, right? And it was the managers' meeting. So he had all the regional managers from Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, China, etc., sitting around the table with him. And they were doing their monthly meeting, sort of check-in meeting, right? So he goes to the first bloke, and he says, give me your report, right? And suddenly he was aggressive. And the guy did his report, and they were all very kind of meek. There was a little sort of cowering thing. And he got to the Malaysian country manager, a Chinese bloke, and he said, what's your story? And the guy started to outlay the figures, etc. And suddenly he got a number wrong. Well, this bloke kind of just lost it. He went, what? I told you yesterday it's 24%, and now you say 40. What's the matter? And screams at him, right? Very Jabba the Huttish in his vibe, right? And this was the most extraordinary thing. This country manager, a young man, right, very, very contained, took this tirade of abuse. Once it had ceased, looked at him and said, when you shout at me in front of my colleagues like this, I find it deeply humiliating. What I'd appreciate if you treated us with a little bit more respect. Yes, I got a number wrong. It's not the end of the world. If we can work more collaboratively as a team, I think we'll get a lot of jobs much better done. If you could please respect us. Sat back. How cool is that? Every eye swivels to Jabba, right? What's he going to do now? And here's the interesting thing was, he sort of was taken aback, sort of settled down, and then apologized. And I thought, oh, I wonder if he's passive-aggressive. You know passive-aggressive people? They always go, yeah, nice, and a little bit later they go for it. So I followed him into the office. I said, what do you think about that Malaysian manager? And he said, wasn't that impressive? I respect people like this. So what was the power that this guy demonstrated? Well, what he was revealing was a key power that we need to all consider. And it's probably one of the most difficult ones because we always can justify not doing this, all right? We always have an excuse for not taking ourselves into this position, which does require some degree of courage, no question about it. And what I'm talking about here is the power to face up. So to face up to the challenge, to face up to the provocation, to face up to the abuse. So this whole notion of facing up is an act of courage. Now, who's ever been to a meeting that's a waste of time? Anyone been to some of those? All right? That was quick. Yes, I live in meetings like that. Right? And yeah, who's been in a meeting and you just know you want to say something, man? Just think this is just a waste of and you got tip of the tongue and you got the thought in your mind, but the other voice in your head goes, better not. Right? It could be career limiting. Right? Play safe. Don't rock the boat. So you don't say it. You don't face up to it. And then that night you're driving home or you're going home in whatever way and you run the videotape meeting in your head again and you see yourself saying what should be said, but you didn't. Right there, you've had a courage corrosive experience. You've had your confidence subtly eroded. And that can start to persist, and before you know it, and I've seen this so many times in big organizations, I see someone's spirit just diminish, often because they didn't have the courage to, to face up. So the power to face up to something, to say what needs to be said. And we think of the leaders that we talked about at that conference in Mumbai, you know, the Mandelas and the Gandhis and the Martin Luther Kings, etc. These were people that did face up. Aung San Suu Kyi, they face up, right? This act of courage. Now, one of the things about this notion here, sometimes the principle is greater than the present. And what I mean by this is that sometimes you've got to face up to something and there will be a consequence, there will be a cost. And the cost could be, you know, career limiting, as they might put it. However, there's a sustaining quality to it because you lived up to a principle. Who's ever done something and you didn't face up and regretted it, sometimes for months or even years? Right? You just didn't do it. You didn't take. So, you know, we do punish those that face up sometimes. And whistleblowers and organizations often have a terrible ride because they had the courage to face up. So is it a sacrificial quality that we have to have here? Maybe, and sometimes. However, I would suggest as a human being, for greatness to occur, facing up is a key component to it. Now, this notion of facing up, what's today? Friday? Friday, right? Is there lotto on tonight? Is there lotto? Well, let's say there is, right? Let's say that you won lotto tonight and you won $4 million. How many would be happy with 4 mil? Yep. Yeah, cool. All right, so you've got $4 million in your pocket. You don't tell anyone. Hopefully you tell your partner. Honey, I'm just going out. All right, so you've got $4 million in your pocket. And so you go back to work, right? You go back to work. What happens to office politics? Care factor, 0. What would happen to hierarchy? You'd knock on doors of people you may never in the past. Hi, you don't know me yet. Hello. Right? Now, what's changed? I would suggest nothing's really changed in regards to your psychology, your capacity, your capability, your intellect, your creativity. All of those attributes are still present, but there's something changed in mindset. So one of the suggestions around the whole face-up story is just act as if you've got $4 million in your pocket. Just act as if. And my sense of this is that in fact we do. I mean, I don't want to overstate this, but I think a lot of immigrants to this country, I think we already are $4 million rich by the fact that we live here. Would you agree with me? I mean, do you notice the boats aren't leaving Australia? You know, they're not leaving Australia. We are 1% in terms of quality of life and opportunity and aptitude. So one of the things to recognize is that this facing up is already within us, and to have the courage to face up is a key skill. Agreed? All right, turn to a few people around next to you and just talk about what do you think about the face-up means to you, based on 2 questions, implications and applications. What does this mean to you? How could you use it? Quick chat. People next to you, implications, applications, face-up.